Hey there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. I'm your host, Pattsun, and for Christmas Day, we will be covering r/Nuclear Revenge, where we will find out how an Army veteran deals with bullies. Let's begin. You want us to strictly follow company policies? No problem. Posted by Reddit users stuck to PC, please help.
Hello everyone. First post here, on mobile and not a native English speaker, so forgive my mistakes. TLDR at the end. Hope this will satisfy your hunger for malicious compliance. This malicious compliance comes from a few years ago when I was working as an external developer for a software house. Nerd! The team was great and the lead developer, let's call him Mark, was simply the best to work with. He was a very skilled developer with also the ability to easily coordinate the team's tasks. We also had a manager, John, who was also very friendly and easy to talk to. Our job was going smoothly. The company tracked the progress of the various projects in the software where John divided them into various steps. John set up these steps very broadly: analyses, initial setup, development, release, maintenance, to avoid creating too many of them. We then needed to input the time we spent on each of these steps. If the project was missing some steps or hit the budget cap, we couldn't input our timesheets and technically weren't allowed to start working. Per company policy, our duty was to inform our direct superior about these issues, in this case Mark. He then should have informed John, who finally would have to increase the cap. As the good manager that he was, John knew all these steps were a huge waste of Mark's and our time, so he allowed us to temporarily sign our time sheets locally and start or continue our work. Gather himself all of our cap increase requests together, do all of them simultaneously, and then directly let us know we could input our time sheets in the software. Then, the company got acquired by a hedge fund. Suddenly a lot of new middle managers appeared, and John was moved to a higher position in a different department. To replace him, they hired Phil. Phil tried to present himself as the manager open to everyone's requests, but it became obvious pretty quickly that he was more I'll stick to company policies as hard as I can guy, probably to appeal to his ego or to some higher up. The first thing he did was to completely change the project's organization, to better check the project advancement. Now in a project, every task, every little change had its own step and budget cap. Remember that if the step was not in the software, we weren't allowed to start working on it. He then enforced our daily time sheets input. It became mandatory to input them at maximum the next day, so we could be more responsible about marking the project progress. It could have been okay if it wasn't for the fact that project budgets were drastically reduced. Basically, after reaching the middle of our developments, we already reached those caps and could not insert any more time sheets. When we started asking Phil about creating those steps or raising the budget caps, like we did with John, he quickly redirected us to Mark, as that was the company policy and the proper chain of command. Mark's job quickly became hell, as he basically had to spend half a day asking Phil to create project steps or raise caps. We knew we were bothering Mark, and he knew we couldn't do anything else. He tried to talk to Phil about easing these policies, but without success. At the end of the month, everyone was behind with the timesheets input and some tasks were not started at all. Phil gathered us and other teams and started his rant about how it was our fault since we required too much time to do our job and it was not acceptable. As our team leader, Mark was particularly targeted and probably missed some bonuses that he had no problem getting when John was the manager. His fault. Not letting Phil know soon enough that steps weren't available or budget caps were reached. It was enough for him. It was time to maliciously comply with company policies. He asked Phil to let us stay some minutes after the meeting to explain to us how to resolve these issues. He agreed, but wanted to stay in the meeting too. Mark calmly said to us, "It is imperative that you tell me, and only me, that steps are missing or caps have been reached as soon as you notice. You must send me an email with this precise subject. I'll then inform Phil. Only mail requests will be accepted." He remarked various times that the mail needed to have a specific subject format, like Project X Step Y missing or Project X Step Y cap reached, and every time he was looking at us with a look that was saying, "Just do like I say, trust me." We started doing exactly what he told us, and soon discovered why he was so confident. A few days passed, and an angry Phil stormed in our room yelling at Mark that his behavior was unacceptable and an urgent meeting with the higher-ups was scheduled in a few minutes. Mark went, and after about half an hour returned with a satisfied smile on his face, and after him a defeated Phil. He later told us that he basically set up a forwarding rule in his mailbox, which forwarded to Phil every single mail whose subjects matched the patterns above, with a predefined text like, "Dear Phil, I'd like to inform you that the team brought to my attention the fact that Project X is missing step Y or similar." In those few days, he submerged Phil's mailbox with our requests. Phil probably hoped that the outcome of the meeting would have gone in his favor, but the higher-ups stated that no company policy was violated. Mark wasn't spamming, as those were all legitimate work-related emails, and was Phil's duty to appropriately manage the situation. Also, Mark now had proof that he was immediately notifying Phil about the project's issues, so nothing could be his or our fault anymore. I stopped working for the company shortly after, but after a few months they told me that Phil was demoted and moved to another position with lesser responsibilities. TLDR, new manager came in supervising our team's work, strictly enforcing company policies about projects' timesheets input, and requesting to address budget caps, increase requests to our lead developer to respect the chain of command. Work quickly gets behind and it became our fault. Lead developer maliciously complies, requiring us to write every single problem we encounter with the project's timesheets input via mail, and automatically forwards them to the manager. He tries to involve the higher-ups, but they defend our team leader.
And then, Reddit user Rude or Sarcastic Part 2 added this short story in the comments.
Similar case, I worked as security gate for large agricultural manufacturing company. In a meeting, the lead supervisor of the plant said we gate guards were not to let anyone through the gates without proper signage on their vehicle. I asked, "No exceptions?" He sighed as if I was stupid and repeated my words, except not as a question. A week later, guess who comes to my gate in a vehicle without proper signage? Yup, Mr. Big Shot. He asks me to let him in. I say no. He says he is late for an important meeting. I looked him right in the eye and said, "No exceptions, that is what I was told." He backed up his car and went to the main office to walk through the building to his meeting.
Operation Let It Go, posted by Reddit user A Quiet Borderline.
My dad just shared a story about my late Uncle Dale, his lifelong friend and fellow engineer. So in his memory and in spirit of the upcoming holidays, I present for you the tale of nepotism, engineering students, and Idna Menzel. Uncle Dale was a senior engineer at a small firm in the Midwestern USA and engineering instructor at the local community college. He was also unofficially in charge of the office parties. To help offset the costs, he had a small tin box on a table outside of his office with a slot in it, so anyone could donate money to the party fund. Everyone knew about it and was happy to donate. A month or so before the company's big Christmas party, Uncle Dale decided to check the box. Lo and behold, it was empty. Uncle Dale knew something was wrong because he had seen several colleagues putting money in the box. This could only mean one thing: someone was stealing from the party fund. At this moment, Brad, the owner's nephew and a fellow engineer, came around the corner, and something about the way Brad was looking at him made Uncle Dale suspicious. Brad didn't have a good reputation around the office, to say the least. He had a reputation of being pushy, obnoxious, rude, and just plain entitled. Unfortunately, he was not only the owner's beloved nephew, but knew how to skirt the rules so he wouldn't get fired. Uncle Dale decided to set a trap to catch the thief. Using his engineering skills, he set up a hidden rig using a hidden doorbell camera right by the box. He then had a colleague loudly brag about how he contributed $100 to the party fund. Then he waited. He got a notification that the camera was recording, and watched Brad open the empty box, scowl in disgust, and throw the box against the wall. Now you'd think this would end with Uncle Dale presenting the video evidence to his boss to get Brad fired, but oh no. As I mentioned in a previous post, if there's one thing engineers love, it's solving problems. And if it's engineering students, they'll make it an experience to remember. Uncle Dale then went to his engineering students. He offered them extra credit to come up with a rigged box that would make noise when opened. The more obnoxious the sound, the higher the bonus. 1 week later, they delivered their project and demonstrated how it worked. Pleased with the results, Uncle Dale awarded them the extra credit as promised. The next day, he set up the rigged box and proclaimed, "Well, isn't this nice? Someone donated $50 to the party fund." Then he went to his office and waited. The engineering students had rigged the box with one of those inserts from cards that play music when you open them. By popular vote, they had picked Let It Go from the Disney movie Frozen, right around the time the song was beginning to become unpopular. They also managed to ensure that once opened, the box couldn't close unless you pressed a hidden side button releasing the hinge, so the song would continue to play. For extra funsies, they made sure to angle the insert for maximum volume and secured it down with industrial-strength glue. Sure enough, everyone in the office heard Idina Menzel belting the hated song and Brad's frustrated grunts while trying to close the box. One of those attracted by the sound was Brad's uncle. Finally, Brad chucked the box against the wall, managing to put a good-sized dent in it. The uncle then summoned Brad to his office. 15 minutes later, Brad left with a cardboard box and cleared out his desk, along with a note in his file: "Do not rehire, do not recommend." So his engineering career was over. That Christmas, Uncle Dale had a little video prepared to show at the party. The doorbell camera had caught Brad's attempt to steal from the box, all to the tune of "Let It Go."
And then, we have this hilarious comment exchange between multiple Reddit users.
Proof that revenge is a dish best served frozen. You got a left out of me. Anna 1 out of me too. Best revenge, hands down. I hate all of you, but y'all get upvotes, so Merry fucking Christmas.
Wow, I never expected that we'd get a cameo from r/angry upvote. And I gotta admit, this was one amazing way to use that annoying song. Deep respect for Dale and his students. Thank you for sharing your father's story, OP. And now for today's final story. This is what happens when neighborhood punks decides to beat up a veteran's son. Posted by Reddit user A Quiet Borderline. Hey, would you look at that? It's the same OP from the previous story.
Apologies for the length. I'll be sure to include a TLDR at the end. All names have been changed to protect the innocent. This is actually a story my dad told me about one of his childhood friends, George, who recently passed away. Dad and George grew up in a booming city in what's now known as the Rust Belt. You were pretty much guaranteed a job at the major car plant in town. As soon as you got out of high school. George was one of those people. Dad wasn't. Dad accepted a scholarship to his dream school to study engineering. During the weekends and holidays, he'd come home and hang out with his buddies, including George. One afternoon, Dad gets a phone call from Grandma. George had been jumped after work and had the metaphorical tar beaten out of him. For a while, it looked like he wasn't going to make it. By some miracle, George pulled through, but was in such bad shape that he had to retire early and go on disability. While on one of his visits home, George's dad, Walter, pulls Dad aside and asks him if he knows a guy named Flynn. Dad had heard the name was one of the local troublemakers. He asked Walter why, and Walter revealed that the wallet had been found by George's body and given to him. The paramedics thought the wallet was George's. No, I have no idea why they didn't check on it. Unfortunately, the city was going through financial difficulties thanks to corruption and mismanagement, to the point that they didn't have enough money to pay their police officers during the weekends. No, I am not kidding. From 8 p.m. Friday night to 6 a.m. Monday morning, there wasn't a single police officer on duty. Since the assault took place on Friday night, there wasn't much anyone can do. Dad asked Walter what he was going to do about it. Walter looked at him with a stern face and said, "I take care of my own." Walter was an Army vet who had served during World War II in Korea. He never spoke about his time, claiming he was a radio technician and never left the base. He never breathed a word to anyone, even George's mother, his wife. The full story never came out until after George's death, when a letter Walter had written before his death was found in George's possessions. After realizing that Flynn was one of the people who had destroyed George's life, Walter got in touch with his friends. He was a personable guy, you know the type, the kind who makes friends in 5 minutes. They all agreed that something had to be done, and thus, Operation George's Revenge was born. Walter and his friends began observation of Flynn and would keep tabs on him. It took several weeks, but eventually, Flynn and his buddies, Mac and Zeno, were overheard bragging about the attack. Knowing who to attack, they moved on to the next steps. Walter's friends, some of whom worked in high places, decided to make some phone calls to their friends in the plant where all three worked. See, these friends were in union. State was closed shop at the time, and, disgusted about what happened to George, they decided to make things difficult for them. They'd remove vital tools for emergency maintenance at the last minute, put them in positions they weren't good in, and rearrange the schedule so they got the worst shifts, to name a few. They also began a whispering campaign so everyone at the plant knew what had happened. In this city back then, who you knew and what everyone thought you've done was enough to make or break you. The goal was to get them to quit, and after a year or so, all three had quit, frustrated with how they were being treated. But Walter and his friends aren't done. Not by a long shot. A few phone calls and anonymous letters later, Flynn, Mac, and Zeno were unemployable in the district. Because they hadn't been fired, they weren't entitled to severance or anything. Soon their money ran out, but they couldn't get out of town because everyone knew from the whispering campaign what they had done to George. For the rest of their lives, Walter and his friends kept an eye on Flynn, Mac, and Zeno. Just when it appeared that they had an out, the whisper and letter campaign would start again and they'd be denied an out. The three men ended up homeless and destitute alcoholics who couldn't even get state aid. And this is in a state that is known for its generous aid for those in bad straits. Walter and his friends made a contingency plan to continue this until the three men were dead using the next generation. So those men would never forget what they did to George. Nobody was able to find out anything about Flynn, Mac, and Zeno, but I wouldn't be surprised that they're still stuck and miserable. TLDR, Dad's childhood buddy was jumped by three troublemakers. Childhood buddy's veteran father and his friends decide to make troublemakers' lives heck for the rest of their lives.
Okay, I gotta admit, I thought this was gonna be a friendly visit type of deal. And quite honestly, I'm used to most nuclear revenge stories involving some sort of physical revenge. This is somehow much better. Well done, OP. Although I do have to think that you are some sort of creative writer because of how many revenge stories you post. Anyways, still well done. You deserve an A. Viewer support is the best way for me to remain independent and continue bringing you these daily videos, which will always be here on my channels for you to watch absolutely free. So please consider subscribing to me on Rumble and on YouTube. Both will be linked in the description box down below. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you even somewhat enjoyed today's story, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, and if you really like it, consider subscribing to PattSun to never miss a future upload. Stay strong.